All right, good morning, everybody. I have a few things I want to talk about today. Maybe I'll make a few different videos because of the variations in what we'll be discussing. Last night I spent a few hours in Muncie, New York. A friend of mine, local to us in Sullivan County, who is the grandson of my Rebbe, the Kalav Rebbe Shlita. He was making a chasana, so it was the Kalav Rebbe's great-granddaughter who was getting married. And both the Hasidic Kalav were second cousins. They were great-grandchildren of the Vishnitzer Rebbe, who was the Messiah Kedushin. So he's a mechutin to my Rebbe, the Kalav Rebbe. And it gave me some time to reflect on the importance in my own personal life of Hasidic devotions, which are, especially, when you're finding yourself in a world that's so radically different from where your comfort zone is. And perhaps, certain people need to sometimes get out of their comfort zone. It's not for everybody. Certain people can't afford to do that. Everybody has to find their own way. But, I myself, I work in a hospital, it's a state hospital, and I have to serve in a way that's radically different than my own comfort zone. We had a memorial service for a patient who passed away under very difficult circumstances, and part of the difficulty of being in these institutions working, sometimes you don't put two and two together. You know a face and a name, but you don't always put them always together. And it happened that, to be honest, I knew this person, and I had I had a connection with him. I mentored him spiritually to a certain extent, but I wasn't aware of exactly who he was until after I actually got up and spoke, and then I thought for a moment, I said, oh, so-and-so, and it was a difficult situation. I spent time, having very nice conversations with certain people I don't usually have the opportunity to have conversations with afterwards, and find myself in an interfaith setting like this, and so many stories and things all kinds of tragedies just came together, but everything was the will of God, and how, it is that I stand, that's my job, and I know a lot of people will say it's wrong, and maybe it is. So what can I do? But we had to make a memorial for this patient, and he deserved it. He had a very difficult life, and it's special that I was able to be there to at least remove some of his pain. It was a blessing to have that ministry in my life. A man from, radically different type of life, racially, ethnically, economically, religiously, everything was totally different. Yet as two human beings, we found common ground that we could communicate with one another. And then from there to go in into my own spiritual world, which is only a few miles away, but is radically different. Something special, the devotion to Hasidic Rebbe's. It's quite an interesting thing. It's something that some people will see as foreign from Judaism, and others will see as central to Judaism, and hearkening back on, the same devotions that existed to prophets and sages throughout history. And how do we find that balance? Where do we, which is it? But still, the excitement to go to see Hasidic Rebbe, to see his face. Nachman Breslover spoke about the importance of looking at the faces of tzaddikim, and and certainly, the tzaddikim who were there, some of the elder tzaddikim of our generation, visions of Rebbe Shlita, and the Kalaver Rebbe Shlita, who's been my Rebbe for almost 20 years. And it's just so incredible. I'll just share with you what happened yesterday. Now, the Kalaver Rebbe has Lou Gehrig's disease. His situation is, he's like Stephen Hawking. He only communicates through a computer that reads his eye movements, because he can't move the rest of his body. And yet every day with that computer, he writes some of the most incredible Divrei Torah that I've seen in a long time from any contemporary. And every week they send it out, they print it and send it out in different shuls, or they email it. And for many years the Rebbe would write Divrei Torah for Yontiv that he would ask me or someone else to translate just for the holidays. And those would have very wide distribution, would be posted on major Orthodox Jewish websites like Yeshiva World and Matzav. And recently he's been writing, and I felt when I first saw his writings, I was like, these need to be translated, at least some of them, every week. And then finally, on his own, he reached out to me to translate every week one Dvar Torah that should be, that's on that week's parsha, that gives chizuk, and it's for everybody, and it's to be sent. So he wants to translate to English to be sent out to his big email list with thousands of people. And so I was there. He didn't have the computer there most of the time. By the chuppah, he didn't have the computer and so forth. They brought him, wheelchaired him to the chuppah. As his mechutin, the Vision Rebbe, also was in a wheelchair. He was Messiah Kedushin, Vision Rebbe. And I was there by the Chassan. They had a badchen, a gramen, not really badchen, wasn't really badchonis, it was, divrei kibushim, divrei chizuk, in these words, he mentioned, just gave a whole list of all the yichus of the Chosna and Kala, mentioning, probably 100 different tzaddikim from over the past 200 years, Hasidic Rebbes throughout history, of who this bride and groom were scions of those dynasties. And a lot of friends of mine are always like, what's this whole story with Yichus and this and that? So, Bekannte Wort, Tzaddikim say that, what does it mean that the Ein Doiva, it says in Parshas, in Rashi in Parshas Toldos, says that Ein Doiva Tfilas Tzadik Ben Tzadik, Tfilas Tzadik Ben Rosha. That in Tzadik Ben Tzadik, his tefillas are more powerful. A saintly person whose parents were saintly are more powerful than the prayers of saintly people whose parents were wicked. And the question is, so what does that mean? And so, therefore, Isaac, his prayers were answered before Rebekah's prayers, because Rebekah, her father, Bethuel, was a wicked man, and Isaac's father was a righteous man, Abraham. And so his prayers were answered before. So what does it mean? Does it mean that that this yichus gives some kind of supernatural power? That's what people assume. No. It's what it means, and I've heard from many tzaddikim, it's like this. If a person is a Baal Tshuva, and they came to Yiddishkeit on their own, without the aid of their parents, they more righteous than their own parents. So then they feel a certain arrogance over their parents. And the arrogance makes it much more difficult for prayers to be answered, because in order for prayers to be answered, you need humility, because you need to recognize that God is the one who's in charge of everything. That's the key to prayer, is humility. So if your righteousness exceeds that of your own parents, you're going to be arrogant. You might become arrogant. Maybe not. Ideally, you shouldn't, but you might. But if you come from holy parents who are more righteous than you, then you're going to say, Masa Yagia Maisai, Masa Avoisai. When are my deeds going to reach the level of my ancestral deeds, my parents' deeds? And so therefore, the tzaddik ben tzaddik, the one who has yichus, is going to be humble based on their yichus, hopefully, ideally. It doesn't always work that way, but I'm saying that's the idea, is that it's going to humble them to recognize that they didn't live up to how good their parents were. And so therefore, their prayers will be answered more quickly. Now, so that's the answer of what it means. When will that the tzaddik ben tzaddik is more righteous than the tzaddik ben rasha. His prayers are more answered than the tzaddik ben rasha. It's interesting. I remember hearing this word, and just after that I was doing some research in genealogy, and I found that particularly yichus from my Zayda's family. My Zayda line is Gevena Grace Tzaddik. Certainly, even though maybe with certain religious devotions, I might be more externally pious in certain ways than my Zayda was, but in actual tzidkus, in the things that really count, my Zayda was a much greater person than I could have dreamed to be. And he was a frumid, he was Shomer Shabbos, Shomer Torah Mitzvahs in his own way. Maybe he had different things, amaratzos and things, but he learned Torah, he davened 3 times a day, he went to minyan more than I go, and he would get up every morning, 6 o'clock, and go to minyan. I have a hard time. We can get to 8 o'clock minyan. Baruch Hashem, I went this morning to minyan, and I was 15-20 minutes late, and I had a yard site for my nephew, and I had all kinds of things. I should have been on time, and I had places to go, and people to see, and things to do, and I'm heading to Manhattan now for a rabbinical conference, and I could even of the Zayda line, Mosai, Yovai, Maisai, Lamaisai, Voisai, and even of my own parents, there's certain things. Even my father's not Jewish, but there's certain things that I would say my parents are much more righteous than me, and so that should humble me even more, because even though I'm quote unquote more religious, but they're more righteous in reality. They're more honest, have more integrity. I think stand for more things than I do, and they deserve much more respect. I don't know if I could live up to what they are. So essentially, whatever, that's what I can say about that. So the whole question of yichus and everything, just a side point, but the Kalaver Rebbe, with his illness and with his total holiness, such a holy man, if you read his Divrei Torah, he is so cognizant of what real life is like for people who have to get up and go work in a business and struggle with difficulties and struggle with challenges and nisyonos in just everyday life. His wisdom and his understanding of these things is just out of this world. And you wouldn't expect someone with his background, with his culture, with his experience, with his lifestyle, to be so cognizant of what goes on in the world, and yet, because he's dedicated his life so much to these things, And so I mentioned to him the Dvar Torah, which is sent out in the email. And I mentioned on Friday, after I translated the email, I emailed it to my Rosh Hashiva, Eli Freilich Shlita from Ezra Academy. And I said to him, I remember in, 11th or 12th grade, you said something along these lines. And I still remember it. And that's why I'm sharing it with you now. I mentioned it to the Kalavar Rebbe. And after I was done speaking with him and I was on my way out, so the Gebarim called me back in. And he, with his eyes and how difficult it was, he went out of his way to write a note. And they print it out. They have a little machine that's like a printer for receipts, you know. And he wrote a note for Rabbi Freilich. I emailed it to him. I'll probably send it to him, so you should have it. So von der Zaya Hartzig Yid, the Kalavar Rebbe Shlita. You should have Fu Shlema. We should all daven for Moshe Ben Rezel. Should have Fu Shlema, Fu Nefesh, Fu Guf. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe.